Good evening, everyone. My name is Caleb Yancey, and today I will be giving a presentation entitled Differentiating Good Type and Bad Type and Their Components. This project is derived from James Felici's The Complete Manual of Typography. First, we want to give a brief background on this topic by acknowledging the power of type along with its byproducts. Good type is rarely noticed, and like a lot of other aspects in media, whenever something is done right, it can very well fall into unobtrusivity. Good design at times, especially in typography, refrains from drawing attention. And on the other hand, a badly executed example of typesetting can tell a completely different story. And a myriad of other problems arise when poor typographical skill and knowledge are applied to any project. And impressions are everything, and how we execute typesetting, whether well or poorly, communicates much to our audience. So first, the first aspect we're going to dive into is the differences of legibility and readability, along with their functions in typesetting. Both of these partner together can either make or break a typographical element. After all, typography is all about appearance, so the first thing we'll see is legibility. Legibility actually refers to the ability to make out the individual letter forms in a text, along with the word forms built by them. Legibility usually is associated with typefaces and fonts, whereas readability refers to the facility and comfort with which a text can be comprehended. Is the text as a whole comprehensible? Good readability contains legibility, but mere legibility does not make a text readable per se. So once we see these definitions, we can get a better grasp on their importance. Next, we can look at some examples for each of these elements. We first see in the first paragraph a bad example of both. Using a script typeface in paragraph form makes it almost completely illegible. With a script typeface, it becomes extremely difficult to differentiate the individual letter forms in the words and the sentences. And on top of that, the leading, which is the spacing between the lines, is very tight, and this is a bad example of readability. The level of difficulty or ease to read the text as a whole. And then you look at the bottom paragraph, which we can see is the exact opposite. Very legible typeface and good leading. So next, with what we've covered so far, we'll dive into type color next. Type color has a few elements that we can look at to better understand what color is in typesetting. Rhythm has to do with the entire reading experience of a text and how the page is constructed, whether typeface, its tracking, kerning, or leading. Any sort of individual intricacy creates a flow for the reader, aka a rhythm. Visual texture is a byproduct of good rhythm. When consistent use of visual texture is used, we can say that the text has good color. And then lastly, involved in this equation is the use of tight and loose lines. The specified color of a text is dependent on how tight or loosely set a text is. Tightly spaced type is synonymous with a dark color compared to loose type, which is considered light. And then continuing on, we can take a look at exaggerated spacing. Overly tight spacing brings with it some problems. Its primary problem is that it interferes with the reader's ability to perceive word forms. Tightly packed spacing transforms a double V into a W, a CL into a D, and an RN into an M. This becomes more of an issue when sans serifs than serif typefaces, because the serifs actually help differentiate the characters slightly with those extra lines. And then contrarily, overly loose spacing is not as common of an issue as overly loose spacing, but it still can pose an issue. Magazine companies often fall prey to this because of laziness. It requires less time to adjust the text from setting it into columns. And then lastly, we'll just take a look at unbalanced spacing. The key to unbalanced spacing is finding the right balance. Most publishing companies have to rely on typesetting programs which can adjust the spacing in between words, letters, and lines. However, these programs are not always trustworthy. Many times these programs have to be adjusted. Spacing is a very gentle issue, and if letters and spaces are expanded or compressed a little too much, a significant risk is faced with readability. With all this being said, here are some concluding thoughts. The key to fighting off all these forms of error in typesetting is training yourself to have a discerning eye. As alluded to earlier, typesetting programs come with a sense of irreliability, leaving the typesetter with a responsibility to rely on their own judgment. It is said that typesetters should learn to trust their eyes and not their tools. A good typesetter can go without additional tools. After all, good typography existed long before modern technological assistance tools existed. And the greatest tool any real typesetter can attain is a critical eye. So thank you so much for tuning into this presentation. I've really had a blast in this class. It's been great, and I'm so glad I got to take it. And Merry Christmas, everyone.